A man who had never owned a cow in his life once stood in a field and told several million people that Australian beef was rubbish. He hadn't tested it. He hadn't studied the numbers. He said it because he was angry. And that single badly informed sentence is now sitting at the center of a beef operation worth an estimated £6 million. This is not a story about a celebrity cashing in on a TV show. This is a story about what happens when a man's mouth writes a check his farm has to cash. And somehow, against every reasonable expectation, it clears. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Jeremy Clarkson never wanted cattle. When he bought Diddley Squat, the plan was arable farming. Wheat, barley, rapeseed. Crops that don't argue back, don't get sick, and don't require you to know anything about veterinary science. Sheep came first, mostly because a neighbor suggested it. Cattle came later, and cattle came out of spite. In 2021, Britain signed a trade deal phasing out tariffs on Australian beef. To farmers already running on thin margins, it looked like the government inviting cheaper imported meat to gut their prices at home. Clarkson, who by then understood exactly how tight those margins were, took it personally. His logic was blunt. If cheap imports were coming, don't compete on price. Compete on something a shrink-wrapped supermarket pack could never offer. A name, a face, a single field the customer could actually picture. So he bought cattle, and he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. He compared the price of a cow to the price of a used car. His land agent stood next to him doing the actual math. By his own admission on camera, year one was, in his words, a total disaster. He shouldn't have bought cows. It was a mad decision. He didn't know anything. That confession matters more than it looks. Most people selling a product hide the part where they had no idea what they were doing. Clarkson filmed it. And it turned out to be the smartest marketing decision he never planned. Here's where the story stops being about ego and starts being about something closer to real farming instinct. When choosing cattle, there were two paths. Continental breeds, big, muscular, fast-growing, bred for mainland Europe's drier climate, often needing grain to finish properly, or native British breeds, slower, smaller, built for exactly this rain and exactly this grass. Clarkson chose native, specifically the beef shorthorn. Strip away the car comparison jokes, and the reasoning holds up. Native breeds finish on grass alone because that's the diet they evolved for. No feedlots, no imported soy, just field and rain and time. And that slower finish produces marbling, the fine threads of fat that separate a steak that tastes like something from a steak that tastes like effort. For years, the industry pushed lean beef as the healthy choice, which favored continental breeds. But the market shifted. Chefs want marbling now. Customers pay for it, and native breeds deliver it on nothing more exotic than English weather. So when Clarkson stood in that field and called Australian beef rubbish, he was, by accident, restating an argument British beef farmers had been making quietly for a decade, that slow-grown, grass-fed native beef is a genuinely different product from mass imports. He just said it to an audience most farmers could never reach. Not every animal on that farm exists for the plate either. One cow, unable to conceive despite repeated attempts, should by any spreadsheet logic have been culled long ago. She's still there. She has a name. That single detail tells you more about how this farm is actually run than any profit figure does. If the first half of this story is ambition, the second half is the part most farming shows edit out entirely. Bovine tuberculosis has been quietly devastating cattle herds across the West Country for years. When it hits, the consequences are immediate. Infected animals slaughtered, movement restrictions imposed, years of breeding wiped out in a single vet visit. Diddley Squat wasn't spared. Neither was the farm's own dairy supplier, who lost half her herd to it. Then there's the badger problem, which is where this gets genuinely uncomfortable to film. Badgers are beloved by most of the country. To farmers, they're frequently the vector for a disease that ends herds. Clarkson has said openly that this was one of the hardest topics to cover honestly, because softening it would have cost him the one audience whose respect he actually needed, farmers themselves. He could have made a show about happy cows in green fields and stopped there. Instead, viewers watched disease outbreaks and financial losses play out in real time, and that honesty is exactly what built trust in the product. When people finally bought that beef, they weren't buying a celebrity's name. They were buying meat from a farm whose failures they'd already watched for years. No marketing budget manufactures that. You either earn it on camera or you don't have it at all. Now here's where the grudge against Australian beef actually becomes a business. And it's a more elegant structure than most people give it credit for. The standard route for British beef runs through a chain of middlemen, farmer to processor to distributor to supermarket to customer. At every stage a margin gets taken, and the person who spent 2 years actually raising the animal ends up with the smallest slice. Clarkson cut almost every one of those stages out. The beef is reared on the farm, sold through 2 channels he built specifically to avoid ever handing it to a supermarket buyer: the diddly squat farm shop and the farmer's dog, the pub he opened to serve only local farm-grown produce. This is the detail most people miss. Clarkson isn't competing on price like a supermarket. He's selling the way a small premium producer sells, on story, on provenance, on the fact that the customer watched the actual field this animal grazed in for free across years of droughts and disease scares, and a man learning in real time not to accidentally kill a cow. You can't buy that. You have to survive it publicly for years first. And it runs both directions. The shop and restaurant need more beef than his own herd can reliably supply, especially in years TB restrictions thin the numbers. So a small cooperative of local producers now supplies extra stock, meaning Clarkson's beef business has quietly become a guaranteed buyer for several of his neighbors' herds too, at a fair price, with no supermarket contract department anywhere in the conversation. In an industry where that's close to the rarest arrangement going, that's not nothing. So, does it actually work? Unevenly, and Clarkson would say so first, usually while blaming the weather. The wider farm's profits have swung wildly year to year. One year produced a profit so small it became a running joke on the show itself. Other years, drought and disease wiped out margins that looked solid on paper months earlier. Farming doesn't reward good intentions or expensive machinery. It rewards rainfall, timing, and luck. And none of those 3 answer to fame, however many cars are parked in the yard. But the beef operation specifically has become the genuine bright spot in an otherwise unpredictable ledger. Industry estimates now put its value, herd, shop sales, restaurant revenue, brand recognition no competitor can simply buy, at somewhere around £6 million. And that's precisely why the big supermarkets can't copy it. They can source cheaper meat from anywhere on the planet and stack it under a promotional banner. What they cannot do, no matter their marketing budget, is manufacture years of one man's genuinely disastrous, filmed relationship with the specific field your steak came from. That's not a supply chain advantage. That's an emotional one. And those don't show up on a spreadsheet until a competitor tries to copy them and quietly fails.